What's it made of? Let's find out.
Hi, I'm Eric Miller from Northwestern University's NUANCE Center, and you're watching
What's it made of?
the YouTube show where we take normal, everyday objects and put them in an electron microscope in order to find out what different elements our sample is composed of. So what will we look at today? Well, when I want to make myself look extra nice for the ladies, I head down to my local grocery store and pick up something special to wear. That's right, we're looking at vending machine jewelry. Is it really gold? Is it really silver? Let's find out.
What it's made of?
We're going to look at a couple different types of jewelry that we're likely to find dispensed from vending machines. We have a gold-colored chain, a silver-colored chain, and a gold-ish looking ring. So the ring was 50 cents and the chains were 75 cents each. Now before we get started, I have something I need to confess. I don't actually think this jewelry is real gold or real silver. I strongly suspect that these have a gold or a silver colored coating over something else. So just to save time, I've cut pieces off of all of these and polished them so we can see them in cross-section, so we can see if there are any different layers. Well, I know that everyone's probably interested in the gold stuff first, so let's start with the ring. We're going to use the backscatter detector, which will give us atomic number contrast, which means that heavy elements will appear bright and lighter elements will appear dark. So looking at it cut in half and polished, we can see the main body of the ring is this lighter color, while we can see this darker colored layer about 5 micrometers thick on the surface. Doing some analysis, we can see this lighter area here is about 99% aluminum with about 0.5% of magnesium. You almost never see anything that's made out of pure aluminum because it's so soft, it's pretty much unusable for anything. At least a tiny bit of magnesium is almost always present to give the aluminum some added strength. But in this layer on the surface, we see a ton of oxygen and a little bit of sulfur. The huge amount of oxygen really tells us what this layer most likely is. This aluminum ring looks like it's undergone a process called anodization. Anodizing basically causes the surface of your part to become super oxidized. Well, why would you do that? Well, let's take the aluminum for example. Aluminum oxide is chemically the same as sapphire, which is the second hardest naturally occurring substance next to diamond. So anodizing your aluminum part will increase the surface hardness as well as give you better corrosion resistance. But in this application, the anodizing process also allows us to color the part, so it doesn't just look like aluminum. We also saw some sulfur in this layer, so why is that there? Well, we have two options. First, the sulfur could be there just to add this orangey goldish color to the ring. But the other possibility is sulfuric acid is the most common solution used in the anodizing process, so it could also be there just from that, maybe. So our gold ring is solved. Now let's look at this gold chain now. Again, we can see very clearly using the backscatter detector a layer of something on the surface of the chain. But the analysis tells us that the chain itself is made from iron? What? If this chain was made of iron, I'm pretty sure I could easily attract it with this magnet. Okay, so the chain is iron, but the layer on the surface isn't. So what does the SEM tell us? Well, in this layer we see copper and nickel. The quantities come out to around 93% copper and about 7% nickel. We know what copper looks like. It doesn't look like gold at all, but just from looking at this, it seems like just adding the 7% of nickel will give that copper this nice kind of goldish color. As an aside, this also tells us why cheap jewelry turns your skin green. Any copper in contact with your skin will react and turn green. So if your jewelry turns your skin green, that means
Copper!
But how did the nickel and copper end up on the surface of this chain? We don't see huge amounts of oxygen like we saw with the anodized gold aluminum ring. The most likely option is that it was electroplated. So what is that? Electroplating is a nifty process. You start off by hooking up the thing you want to coat and the thing you want to coat it with to an electrical source and submerging them in an electrolytic bath. What's an electrolytic bath? Well, that can be something as simple as salt water. When an electrical current is applied, atoms travel from the positively charged side and collect on the negatively charged side. Thus, a coating is formed. Lastly, let's take a look at our silver chain. For starters, it looks like iron again. But let's check out this surface layer. It looks like copper. And just copper. That's weird because this chain is not copper colored. So where is that silver color coming from? Maybe the top layer is super thin and I just didn't polish the surface of the sample well enough to see it. Well, I'm far too lazy to polish this sample anymore, so let's do this. I'm going to take another link off this chain and sand off the surface just a little bit. So when we put it back in the microscope and we see an area with something missing, we know that that something that's missing is what was on the surface. Okay, so here's our area that we sanded, and we can see a lot of iron here, which means we sanded all the way through any layers on the surface. Good. We can also see copper still here on the top of the iron and a little bit around the edges of where we sanded the area, which is what we would expect. But we haven't seen anything showing up too much in these areas that weren't sanded. So whatever element or elements we see here will be the mystery silver colored layer. So what is it? Silver! Silver? Seriously? Like real silver? Okay, let's put our heads back on straight and think about this for a second. First, why is there this copper layer in between the silver and the iron? Well, if the chain was electroplated, that would explain the presence of the copper layer. In the electroplating process, the atoms coming from the one piece actually attach themselves to the other piece by forming an alloy of the two metals. Well, not all metals get along well enough to actually do that, and silver and iron are just such an example. They won't alloy with one another, but iron and silver will both alloy with copper. So it looks like that copper was put down on the iron just so that the silver would stick to the surface. Now the real question is, should I be excited about getting actual silver out of a vending machine? Well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. This silver coating was so thin, we couldn't see it in the cross-section. So how thin is this layer? Based on how well I polished it, I'm going to guess that it was probably less than 1 micrometer thick. Now how big is 1 micrometer? Well, the hair on your head is usually about 50 to 100 micrometers thick. So that's pretty small. So how much silver is there in this whole chain? Well, here's what I did. I assumed that each link in this chain was a cylinder. I found out the approximate diameter and length of that cylinder and was able to calculate the volume of a 1 micrometer thick silver layer. And then more math, blah, 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 blah. I ended up with about 25.4 milligrams of silver contained in this whole chain. And how much is that worth? Well, the current spot price of silver is around $24 an ounce, which makes my 25.4 milligrams of silver worth about 2 cents. And I paid 75 cents for this necklace. I think I got ripped off somehow. So there we have it! Fascinating! If you have something you want us to take a look at, just put it in the comments section below. From Northwestern University's NUANCE Center, I'm Eric Miller, and we'll see you next time. So I put this ring that my girlfriend gave me into the microscope. Turns out it's anodized aluminum as well, which wouldn't be so bad, except she told me that this ring represented how much our love meant to her. Good.